Welcome to the Founder Hour podcast. Before we get into the episode, just a quick word about our sponsor, Outer. You know I've raved about Outer before, and I love my Outer sofa, outdoor dining table, and chairs. I've had them for over a year, and let me tell you, they've been through everything from rainstorms to scorching sun and still look brand new. That's because Outer makes outdoor furniture that's actually designed for the outdoors. From using incredibly durable and sustainable materials to developing innovative solutions like the Outer Shell Cover, which protects my sofa and dining table against dust, debris, and dirt. No more soggy cushions or dusty tabletops. My Outer setup is always clean, dry, and ready to be enjoyed anytime I want. Head to liveouter.com/thefounderhour to see Outer's range of outdoor furniture, fire pits, and accessories. The Founder Hour listeners get an exclusive 10% off for a limited time. Terms and conditions apply. So elevate your outdoor space with Outer. That's liveouter.com/thefounderhour. Here we go. Ray Dalio, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here. It's really nice to meet you and a treat to have you here. And you've led an incredible life up until this point. You've built one of the most successful, not just investment firms, but private companies in the history of the world. And you've written a New York Times bestselling book called Principles, which we'll dive into. And now in this next chapter of your life are focused on, really wonderful charitable work and philanthropic efforts. And so I'm really excited to dive into all that. But let's take it back for a bit and talk about your early days. You grew up middle class, Long Island, New York. What was childhood like for Ray Dalio?
I had a dad who was a jazz musician. I had a mom who was a stay-at-home homemaker mom. My mom loved me, adored me. My dad was a very both strong and creative man. He was strong. He went through World War II and the Korean War and had very strong character. But he also had the improvisation or the flow that a jazz musician has. I was an only child. And so I was in a neighborhood. I had a bunch of friends in the neighborhood. I liked to play with the friends. I didn't like school. I paid no attention to school. I didn't even understand why we were doing all that stuff.
Right.
So that was kind of what my early, when I was 12, in my early years, I had odd jobs. I had a newspaper route. I would mow lawns and deliver shovel driveways and all that. And I also caddied. And when I was 12, I was caddying, and the people I caddied for bought stocks, and they were in the business. And everybody at that time, and almost everybody in the world, was talking about stocks. If I got a haircut, the guy who was cutting my hair would have his stocks and everything. So I started taking my caddying money and I put it in the stock market, and it was I can tell you what my first experience was, but it hooked me.
Yeah, sure. I'm actually, before we get into that, I'm curious, your dad being a jazz musician, which is not maybe as common as other professions, having parents that are sort of in that field. What impact did that have on you at all, perhaps early on and even later in life?
I think that there's something about jazz that is improvisation and free flow within a structure. So I think subliminally, it may have played a role. I'm sure my dad played a role and my mom played a role subliminally in a lot of ways. The jazz part is kind of, a free flowing creativity, but with structure and talent. So I think that I feel still a connection to jazz. When I'm doing things with people, it feels like I'm playing jazz with them. We'll do things together. It's like playing jazz, or if I'm working with somebody, it's like playing jazz.
Just jamming. So you're 12 years old. You start trading the markets. Yeah. What was that first experience like that actually hooked you and you decided this is what I want to do with my life?
The first share. Okay. I earned $5 and $6 a bag. I carried 2 bags. And then when I got $50, I put it in the markets. My dad had a broker, and everybody did, and so that's what I did. And the first stock I bought was a company by the name of Northeast Airlines, and it was the only company that I heard of that was selling for less than $5 a share. And so I figured I could buy more shares. So if it went up, I would make more money. Now, that was obviously nonsensical, but the company was about to get acquired, about to go broke, and some company acquired it, and it tripled in value, and I was hooked. And so then I'd look at the newspapers, and the back of the Wall Street Journal or the New York Times had all these names. And I figured I just had to pick one or two or three that would go up. I mean, how challenging can this be? Just pick something that's going to go up and I could make money. So I liked the idea of taking my caddying money and doing that. And of course, I thought investing was easy. And, through my years, I learned investing is anything but easy.
Right. Growing up middle class, I'm curious, before you reached a place of financial freedom, what was your relationship with money early on? And were you in a pursuit of money? Did you want to go into finance for the purpose of money, or was there something bigger than that?
Not at all. I was very lucky in that the game that I fell in love with would pay money. I just wanted to do what I wanted to do, and I liked the game. Now, of course, money, in the earlier days when I didn't have any money, I valued the money. In other words, just like I valued what the money I earned caddying, I liked the game of what I do, and I valued the money that I could making money in the markets. But it was kind of like I really enjoyed it, and so and then you go through these stages of life. And I remember, there's a necessity. Like in my early years, I wanted enough pocket money and play around, and then I wanted to go do what I wanted to go do. But I liked the game. As I became older, and I had a job, and I had a family, what I was doing for the job and taking care of my family and myself. So I got to think, let's say when I was in my early 20s, I suppose, I remember thinking to myself, how many weeks, months, and years could I live okay and take if no more money came in? Money always connected to utility of money, and I'm not a luxury guy. I'm a more of do I have freedom guy, and can I take care of my family? And so that happened, and then money, as I acquired it, enabled me to pursue my passions, to play in a bigger way in my game, and then to build my way of doing that, which was Bridgewater. So I didn't even really think of Bridgewater as being a company. I didn't say I'm going to start a company and make a lot of money, and that's my goal. I just knew I wanted to do these things, and these things required other people, computers, and stuff that I had to acquire in order to do this thing that I passionately like to do. And it produced money, and I like the fact that it's produced money, but I never wanted the money thing. The money has marginal utility. And sometimes people lose sight of what is the money for, or they can become obsessed with it. And so it's really, what do you want? Do you want freedom with your money? Do you want to have impact with your money? And so on. So those things. So I have a principle to, make your work and your passion the same thing. And don't forget about the money part, because the money part is important. It's very important to have the freedom and the power to do what you want to do. That's great. But don't lose sight of the purpose. But if you can make your work and your passion the same thing, you're going to have a great life. And the way I want to do that as I say, meaningful work and meaningful relationships.
Yep. So you started Bridgewater in 1975 out of your 2-bedroom apartment. If we were to jump in a time machine right now and go back to that apartment, tell me about that time. What was it like?
I went to Harvard Business School with a roommate who had the first front apartment, a 2-bedroom apartment. He had the front bedroom. I had the back bedroom. He moved out. I got fired from my prior job because I was rowdy.
I read you punched your boss in the face, among other things.
Yes.
How did that happen? Before we get it, how did that happen? What prompted you to do that?
Okay. We're first of all, we're in a different era at this time. So
right.
My boss, who was a good guy, was on New Year's Eve. We got drunk. It was the office party, and one thing led to another, and I decked him. I punched him, and then it was bad that he, on driving home, he totaled his car. His wife chewed him out for being messing up their New Year's Eve. I wasn't good within the company in that way, but the clients of the company loved working with me, and so they would pay me for my advice. And that's how I started Bridgewater. I say I started Bridgewater actually when I was at Harvard Business School and was dealing in commodities. This was 1973 when they had the oil shock. And people I went to school with went to different places, and they wanted to buy commodities from Iran and from places like that. And I would put them in contact, and I created this company that called Bridgewater. So I had this corporate existence. And then when I essentially went out on my own and they were paying me for advice, I used Bridgewater.
Yeah. Tell me about the time you almost shut Bridgewater down. I think it was in the early 80s. You were sort of betting against the U.S. economy at the time. At a point like that, how do you bounce back? Like mentally, you have to shut this company that you've built for several years and shut it down. How do you come back from that?
Yeah. So fast forward, I built this great team of people, but it wasn't a big company. I don't know, tiny, 12 people or 15 or something. And then in 1979, 80, 81, we had a huge inflation, and Paul Volcker, the Federal Reserve, tightened monetary policy. And I calculated that American banks had lent a lot more money to foreign countries than those countries were going to be able to pay back. And I said, we're going to have a big debt crisis. And it got a lot of attention. And then when Mexico defaulted on its debt in August 1982, and other countries started following because I had made that call correctly, I got a lot more attention. And I thought we were going to have an economic collapse, bad situation, and I couldn't have been more wrong. August 1982, when Mexico defaulted, was the exact bottom of the stock market. And so I lost money for me. I lost money for clients. I was so broke that I had to borrow $4,000 from my dad to help to pay for my family bills. I had to let everybody go. And okay, that's where I was. And this was one of the most painful experiences, but certainly one of the best experiences that happened to me, because it changed my whole approach to decision making. That was really why I was successful. And those changes, I could explain them to you if you want.
Yeah, but I'm just curious your mindset at this time. You're this guy who worked a little bit, in sort of like a professional setting, and then started this company and sort of built it. Were there ever moments of doubt, like in that time when you had to shut it down, about yourself, about whether you were someone that was going to be capable of bouncing back and building a successful business, that you were, I don't know, going to be reach levels of success? Like, did you ever doubt yourself or
No,
no?
it was more like, and I want to say this for entrepreneurs. If I had a bed to sleep with, food to eat, could take care of my family, and had the shot, great. And what the hell, if it didn't work, then I'll go get a job.
Mm.
So that was my basic attitude about it. And I encourage entrepreneurs, whatever it is, like, what do you think about what you really need? So can you have the freedom to experiment and do that? So that was kind of my mindset. But when I went broke, the thing that was making me worried is the idea of putting on a suit and tie and getting on the commuter railroad and going downtown and operating, in the Wall Street job, a typical Wall Street job. That was the thing that scared me.
Right.
I mean, that's the thing I kind of didn't want to go do. So then I wrestled with, okay, how do I deal with that situation? Because I wanted the upside of a great life, but I didn't want to get whacked. And there's the risk return, and if you go for greater return, you're going to have greater risk. And I learned two things. First, I gained a humility that I needed to balance with my audacity. In other words, I said to myself all the time, and I still do, how do I know I'm right? How do if I disagree with somebody, how do I know I'm not the wrong one? And the second thing is I learned how to have diversification. So, and to reduce my risk by 80% without reducing my return. And the way it felt to me was like I had a choice. I felt like there's a jungle, and I'm on one side of the jungle, the safe side of the jungle. I could go get a job, and that's the safe side of the jungle. Or I can go through the jungle. The only way I'm going to get to a great life is to go through the jungle that's very dangerous to get to the other side, but that's the great life. And that's what it felt like to me. And I knew that I had to go into the jungle and I had to find my way. I couldn't go into that other existence of, the job and the commute and all of that thing. So I found out how to do it, which was with great people who would see things differently than me. And we would all be on the same mission. And we would take care of each other as we go on that same mission through that jungle. And then what happened was I so enjoyed being in the jungle that I didn't want to get to the other side, which is success and sitting back. So that was what it felt like.
Yeah. I remember being a kid and reading about people like Steve Jobs, who virtually came from nothing and sort of built these incredible businesses. And that gave me that exposure and that sort of feeling of like, wow, anyone can I can do it. If I really found something that I was passionate about, an opportunity. And you've famously been called the Steve Jobs of investing. I'm just curious, if there was anyone at that time when you were starting Bridgewater that you were inspired by or looked up to or looked at and said, wow, like they did this and it's possible to go out. Because entrepreneurship and all that, we've talked about it a lot in the last 2 decades, but at that time I can imagine it wasn't as common of a thing, being discussed all over the place. It was like, entrepreneurship, start a business, this and that.
I didn't have anyone in my earlier years, but I always did admire and like Steve Jobs. I liked his audacious creativity that he, conquered and deliver remarkable products, and I liked that. But there was nobody that I would say played the role that you're describing.
Yeah. What is the holy grail of investing?
15 good, uncorrelated investment return streams is what I call them. Okay. You want to pick good investments, and they have to be good investments. But any single investment may be great and may not be great for things that pop up. You don't know if there's going to be a COVID or a war or who knows what there is. So you never know. And if you can put them together with another good investment and another good investment, and you put 10 or more of those together, you can eliminate 80% of your risk if you can construct the portfolio that way. So so as I speak to your audience, and I say in terms of your investing, think about not just what is a good investment or a bad investment. Think about how they fit together and diversify each other. Because if you can do that, that's the holy grail of investment, meaning you will make a fortune.
Yeah, you've talked about and found that most everything has happened repeatedly throughout history. You call it another one of those, and you talk about in your book, recessions and depressions and things like that. But you just alluded to COVID and the pandemic. When that happened, because I know that was after you wrote your book. When that happened, and this like unprecedented thing, or so it was, supposedly, it was something that was talked about for a long time, but like no one really saw it coming. And when it came, it was kind of the shock to the world of like, how do we deal with this thing, right? Did your mindset change at all about how these quote chance events could affect not just your portfolio, but like life in general?
I was a bit used to the fact that what you don't think can happen can happen. So, and I also had developed an instinct that if something came along that I hadn't seen before, it looked like a new species for me. And I would go back into history and say, what can I learn from that species? So, for example, studying the Great Depression allowed me to anticipate and do very well in the 2008 financial crisis. So my instinct is always, if I haven't seen this before, it probably happened in history. I need to study 10 times in history to understand how these things work. So let me put a collection of those things around and give me some perspective, and I need to have a systemized response to that. So, but I didn't have that. I didn't pre-plan for that, and but I had excellent diversification, so it didn't hurt me much. So because if you have excellent diversification, and you stress test that you've through history to see what goes up when the other thing goes down, and even how correlations change over time, it can help you do that. So, and all of those cases, I kind of view like it's a ride. I'm on this ride and I want to get the perspective of history, but it's kind of, it's an exciting ride and, do the best I can. And of course of course it was terrible that people were dying. And so when I say it's an exciting ride, it was terrible. I had friends who died and such things. So I don't mean it that way. I mean, it is what it is, but back to your main point, almost everything is another one of those. Happens over and over again in maybe a more modern version because they evolve over a period of time. And so I got in the habit in my early years of reflecting. I have a principle: pain plus reflection equals progress. Because when you're going through a painful experience, you don't want to do those, but there are lessons embedded in that experience, and it tells you how reality works. And if you just say, you don't fight it, you think, okay, how does reality work? And how do I deal with reality? So when the next one of those comes along, I'm going to be in good shape. That is and then I write down my principles. My principles are essentially recipes for making a decision. So I press, and in the company, I built Bridgewater by computerizing all of those. So because the same thing happens over and over and over again, maybe but in an evolving way.
Yeah. So speaking of building Bridgewater, you're someone just to even have started the business and all the sort of innovative things along the way that you did. You have to be this sort of mega risk taker. Be it calculated risk, but there's still risks at the end of the day. You're not sort of just in your box,
I
doing what.
react differently to it.
Yeah.
To me, there's a risk of plodding along ordinary life, of the lack of the adventure. Like I say, what are my risks? If I have a bed to sleep in, if I can take care of my family, if I can have food, whatever it is, like like how, then I could always, and if I can't get that, I can get a job. So I've had more of a risk of my life not being as great as I want it to be. And then I had to deal with, how do I deal with getting that great upside while having the eliminating the risk of the painful experience I had in '82, and how do I do that? And that's the key. You can have the upside while controlling the downside, and you can have a fabulous life. The person who doesn't take the chance, and operates that way in safety, is going to have a different kind of life.
I love that. And my point was kind of going to be, as you grew, how did you build Bridgewater and hire people, like you call them shapers, these people that go on and really do impactful things? How did you find those types of people to grow and build the culture at Bridgewater? And then eventually when it came to succession planning and moving on, a lot of times we see companies die when like their visionary founder leaves because they didn't hire the people that thought the way they did or approached life the way they did. How did you go about finding those people? How did you gauge that?
Well, again, I want to emphasize, I think everything that works like a machine, and there are different pieces of that machine. I don't mean it in like an impersonal. When people say a person is like a machine, I know how different a person is, and there's love and there's sensitivities and all of those things, but they still, in the sense, have love and sensitivities, and they have other things. So they operate differently. If you know what a person is like, you can pretty well know how they'll behave. And so I knew that in building Bridgewater. So I would give personality profile tests. By the way, I put it out free online. Principles U. Go take the personality profile test. It's free. Takes you about 30 minutes. It'll tell you a lot about yourself, and have other people take it, and it'll tell them a lot about them. And if there's a feature in it, by the way, that if two people take it, it'll tell them about their relationship. So what I did was to make it a machine, design it to know what the people are like. I made a science out of this. So, but again, following the mantra. The mantra was meaningful work and meaningful relationships through radical truthfulness and radical transparency. So what I wanted people who are in the mission with me, and I wanted great relationships, just the nature of it. It was not transactional. It was not bureaucratic. I wanted to go to the weddings, the funerals, I wanted to have an extended family. That's what the relationships mattered to me. And I saw how they could be mutually supportive. But we had to be truthful and deal with our strengths and weaknesses, and transparent, because when everybody sees things, then they know what's really going on. There can be no spin. And then we talk about things and work them out to achieve the goal, like a successful team does. So anyway, the answer to your question is I engineered it this way, so that, it's largely in engineering. What is a person like? And what I mean by that, I mean, I think there are values, abilities, and skills, three different things. So what are your values? What are you going after? What are you going to be like with me? And what am I going to be like with you? That's most important. Then we're born with different abilities. Some people see the big picture and they're creative, but they're not reliable. Somebody's reliable and whatever, and take care of all of the details, but they're not creative. They're all of use. And so what are they and how do they work together? And then there's skills. Skills are the things you acquire, like, can you speak a language or do you know about this and that? I think most companies hire for skills and they don't pay enough attention to values and abilities. And so for me, it was the other way around. I wanted those things, and that's why radical truthfulness and radical transparency. So that was my approach.
Customers are rushing to your store. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. Shopify POS is your command center for your retail store. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify has everything you need to sell in person. Get hardware that fits your business. Take payments by smartphone, transform your tablet into a point of sale system, or use Shopify's POS Go mobile device for a battle-tested solution. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Do retail right with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/founderhour. Once again, go to shopify.com/founderhour to take your retail business to the next level today.
On the topic of personality assessments, I think I've seen you said that you're an ENTP. I'm an ENTJ when it comes to the Myers-Briggs MBTI. I'm just curious, do you think that people should be much more intentional about understanding themselves? I know you're very into like neuroscience and data-driven decision-making and things like that. If we understood ourselves better, do you think that we generally, the population would be happier, more, satisfied with their work and the people that they worked with?
Yes, and more successful. Because I think that, first of all, understanding yourself is going to understand what makes you happy. And what makes you happy is where your inclinations are. And that's where your talents are. That's why make your work and your passion the same thing is good. And then also to understand that everybody has strengths and weaknesses. And that doesn't mean you have to convert your weaknesses into strengths, because it may not be your natural strength. But what you can do is work well with people who are strong where you're weak, and that in a good, wonderful way, and you can get to your goal. I really do believe anybody can be very successful. I wrote it all down in the book, Principles, because of the capacity. It doesn't have to all be in your head or you do it all. If you know how to build the machine, that's your company, or you know how to interact with other people who are strong where you're weak, and so on, you can accomplish what the best can accomplish, even though you don't have it all in yourself.
Yeah, and in terms of your book, Principles, these are things that I think a lot of maybe people subconsciously adopt over time, but they don't really write it down, and they're not as intentional about like making an actual sort of guidebook for themselves even.
I don't think most people actually come to it and adopt it and change. I think the way it really works is more the opposite of what most people really think works. For example, mistakes, pain, weaknesses. Like, people don't like them. They think of themselves as a failure. Like the education system, you study, you get your grade, but the learning begins with your failure. Mm-hmm. The learning, because if you didn't fail, then you got it right, and But if it's how do you deal, and like most things in life are more the opposite. Like the food that's fun to eat is not as good for you. There are second order consequences. The exercise that's painful, you don't want to do, is good for you. The second order consequences are more often the opposite of the first order consequences. And pleasure has done people more damage than pain. if it's tolerable and dealt with well. And so what is failure? It's just a step on a journey. It's what do you do when you fail, and how do you learn and make the most of it? And I got to know all these incredibly successful people at all levels. And it's so funny because they get it. They have encountered it, and they're successful because they got it and they intuitively, got it. And it's so opposite than what most people think they are like and what they're doing. Oh, they're brilliant. Okay. If you get into their failures and their learnings and their approach. So yes, you're right. I gave the personality profile test to a number of shapers because I wanted to find out what I mean by a shaper is an individual who can visualize terrifically and then build it out and make it happen. So I gave it to Bill Gates, Elon Musk, a lot of people who are like that and who I happen to know. And I got a certain personality profile test. And it's the same thing, okay? And it's not well conveyed because the education and so on is more along the lines of remember the instructions I'm giving you, remember the things I'm telling you, so when I ask you, you give it back to me the way I told you, okay? If you make mistakes, you've got a problem. There's something wrong with you. It's not like that.
Right. You wrote the book in 2017, and since then, have there been any other principles that have come to you that you've adopted that you wish you had put in the book?
Yes. I'm learning principles all the time. I would say I write a principle down on average once every 3 days.
Okay. Give me an example of one that you're like, wow, this one is, I wish I put this in the book.
A good example, I've learned a bunch of principles about transitioning to my new phase in life. So there's a whole bunch. I'm 75. I've built it. I've transitioned it. I ran Bridgewater for 47 years. How do you transition it? It's analogous to having adult children. It's the same because as I go through these experiences, I learn. It's like having almost very similar to having adult children or having a business. How do I make it great for them? How do they need to run it? It's up to them. I might help to give them values or some things, and I'll be happy to answer questions and give mentoring, but they now have to do it. And what is our relationship like? A relationship of mentorship and whatever, and then learning what the freedom of this new stage in life is like, the freedom and the excitements of this new stage in life. And then thinking what matters when you're 75. Okay, I know that I'm coming near my end. And as I come near my end, what do I want to do? How do I want to pass it along what I've got philanthropically or otherwise, how do I do those things? And with the joy, and I experience what it's like to be a grandfather, and I experience what it's like to have that family relationship. So these are new experiences. Death. I lost a son. I'm the worst thing that ever could happen to me. I would rather died. I would have rather lost everything I had than to lose that. Okay, what is that like? What is that? How is other things? So there's constant learnings but calming oneself down and reflecting on the realities, leads to principles.
Yeah. You stepped down in 2017, which is around the same time I think you wrote the book. Since then, what are some of these? You mentioned these like philanthropic charities and things like that you're involved in. What's something that you're really passionate about that you've been working on since then?
Well, just to be clear, I stepped down in 2017 as the CEO. I was still the owner. I owned all the voting shares and the rights, so I still have a responsibility to transition it.
Yeah.
I went back into a CEO job because that CEO didn't work out. And then I passed it along, and I wanted others to succeed without me. So I was operating like a mentorship. And then I turned the whole thing over, I don't know, about 2 years ago, and completely got out. So that was the chronology. So the things I'm doing is mentoring, passing along principles and so on. I never wrote the book of investment and economic principles, so I'll write that. I still play my investment game. I love investing. That's a great game for me. I'm helping a lot of world leaders in interesting times. I'm doing a lot of philanthropy. I have a passion for ocean exploration, so that's a big thing. If you want to check it out, Ocean X is the name of my philanthropic ocean exploration. What happened for that is when I was growing up, Jacques Cousteau, who was an ocean explorer and showed it, his Ocean Explorer had a big effect on me. So I learned, and I did this fast forward. So I created this ocean exploration initiative with the best ocean exploration ship on the sea, and you will be able to watch it on National Geographic and Disney starting on August 16th. So because I want to affect people the way others, because I think the ocean is exciting, enthralling, and extremely important. So that's one of the things. And then I'm doing philanthropy in a lot of other ways. And I'm spending time with my family and my grandkids.
Yeah. I think we live in a really wonderful world, and it's not perfect, but there are obviously many issues that we still have to work through. And I'm curious from your perspective, what you see is the biggest issue facing the world today, whether it's macroeconomically or just microeconomically.
The biggest issue is how we deal with each other. There are 5 big issues or forces that have shaped history throughout that. Okay, they are an economic debt, money, and an economy, and how that works. That's one thing. Second is internal conflict or working well. There's a cycle. There's a debt cycle, and then there's a internal order and disorder cycle. We're in the part of the disorder cycle where we have irreconcilable differences and we're going to fight with each other, and democracy is at risk. And so we're at the risk of changing our domestic order. That's a big thing. The third is that the great power conflict in the world, where we are no longer the sole dominant power in the world. So we don't control that whole world. And now there's a great power conflict. That means greater risks of conflict in their various forms, economic, but also wars and those things. We're in that time, that part of the cycle. The number 4 thing, and this isn't in order of importance, this is just almost how I discover them, is throughout history, acts of nature, droughts, floods, and pandemics have killed more people, toppled more orders than wars and anything. They're a big thing. And so climate change and its implications is a big, giant force. And number 5 is throughout history is man's inventiveness and the inventiveness of new technologies. And that's going to be an amazingly powerful force. So the 5 forces, those are the 5 forces that are going to interact. And I watch how they do it. And when I study history, they operate in a cycle. And we are in the bad part of that cycle. We're in a worsening part of that cycle because the first is not in good shape. The amount of debt, the levels of indebtedness, what it means. the level of internal conflict. We are now win at all costs. We have extremism on both sides, and it's win at all cost and don't fight fair. And do we question whether democracy, does the Supreme Court rule, or who rules? Are we going to have anarchy? Number 3 is that wars and the intercourse. Number 4 is the climate. Those 4 things are all not going in the right way because of big cycles. And then we have technology, which can go in either way. And so when I say it's how we are with each other, like, we have the power, if we are good with each other, if we can work it out in a smart way where we don't damage each other and damage the environment, and do it in a smart way, we have the capacity. But human nature is our biggest problem. So if we're taking living standards, for example, living standards are higher in the world than they've ever been. We have more resources. We know we're smarter. We're everything. Why should we have a highly risky situation that's more risky than ever before? It's because we're not. It's how we're dealing with each other. So can we look at the greater purpose and do this in a way of a mutually supportive and harmonious way of dealing with our challenges, or can't we? That's why I say it's how we're dealing with each other is the most important thing.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of technology, you talk about AI, artificial intelligence, a little bit in your book, but I'm curious, since then it seems like it's boomed and it's everywhere now, and everyone's talking about it. I'm just curious what your outlook is. I know in the book, it could be maybe considered a little grim of like, is AI good for us? Is it not? But I'm just curious in terms of, from your words, like how you view the impact of it moving forward.
Well, it's a tremendously powerful tool that can either benefit mankind a whole lot, raise productivity and so on, or be used for wars and damaging each other. So so it's all really a matter of how we deal with it and deal with each other, really. And it'll bring up questions. It's going to bring up great turbulence. So, for example, it'll replace a lot of people in jobs. It'll make there are a lot of unicorns. So, billion-dollar companies that are entrepreneurs start up, and that produces great rewards for creating that, and also big wealth gaps for the unemployed and things. And so how are we going to figure that out? That works well for others because people will naturally pursue their self-interest. So how does that work? And so how will our democracy system work? How will we would be with each other? That's the big question.
Yeah. I want to kind of move a little bit towards talking about meditation, which I know is something that you've practiced for a long time, transcendental meditation, and talk about. And I know you were inspired by the Beatles, which I have the Abbey Road right here, and I'm a huge Beatles fan. So I'm just curious, what impact that has had throughout your life. If have any major life or career decisions come out of that that you can speak to?
All of them. The most important gift I can give anybody is meditation. I know transcendental meditation. That's what I do. And it's the most important thing I give. It's the most important reason for whatever success I've had in life, because it gives me the equanimity and the creativity to deal with my circumstances as well as I possibly can. It's the way it works is there's a mantra, which is a sound. That's a word. An example might be Om. And when you sit there quietly with your eyes closed and you repeat it in your mind, it means you can't think about other things because you got this Om, Om, Om going on. So your other thoughts don't come in. And then when you repeat that enough times and you get practiced, you transcend, which means the om goes away and everything goes away, and you go into a subconscious state. You're not conscious and you're not unconscious. You're in a subconscious state, and the subconscious is what's really controlling you. That's you're subconsciously like this thing or don't like this thing, or habits that you get into. They're all in that subconscious. And that they also, creativity is a lot in that subconscious. Like, you know what happens? You take a hot shower and ideas flood into your head. It's not like you're muscling them. It's just that they flow. You get that flow that comes from that subconscious state. And so when you're in that subconscious state, that you have connected your consciousness and your subconscious, and it flows. You get better flow out of that, and I align them. So what I've learned is that subconsciously there are emotions and intuitions and other things that are subconscious. And then there is conscious, there's logic and awareness and so on. And I've learned to align them. When my subconscious and my emotions are aligned with what I think, I make better decisions. And so it gives me that equanimity. Okay, it's coming at me and it's happening. And how do I deal with it? Okay, how does reality work? How do I deal with it? And that kind of thing. And that's helped me enormously.
What is your routine like? I mean, what time of day do you practice it? How often? How often, and how long is the sort of session?
My ideal routine, which I do sort of most of the time and not always, is a meditation before breakfast and a meditation in the late afternoon before dinner. But it doesn't have to be that way. They're 20 minutes. But what happens is it's more like I always slip it in somewhere. Maybe, I don't know, I could be on a plane or I could be being driven someplace or something, and I can slip it in. And I also have a feeling. I feel different. Let's say it's tense and there's stress or there's worry and whatever, or I feel different, and I say, oh, I need to go meditate. And I go sit down and I do the meditation, and it all, falls off me, and I get that. So sometimes it's spontaneous.
Yeah. Did you ever get to see the Beatles perform live?
Once, Shea Stadium, and
Stadium.
I couldn't get into the stadium, but we could get high enough that we could see them perform in the stadium.
That's awesome. I think I've seen videos, and it's crazy how many people are there.
Yeah.
I mean, I wish I could go back and go to one of those shows. I've seen Paul McCartney a couple of times,
and I went back to where in Rishikesh, in India, where they had the ashram, and I walked around. It's now grown over with a jungle and so on, but it's very interesting, very, very interesting, very cool.
Yeah. I remember being in college and reading a book called, I think it's The Paradox of Choice. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's by this man named Barry Schwartz. And in the book, he talks about how there are two different types of people. I'm sure there's more, but he talks about maximizers and satisficers, and how maximizers are people that are always constantly, just like really ambitious, looking for the next thing. And satisficers are a little bit more content, and they tend to be happier because they're not always sort of chasing this next big audacious goal. I'm just curious, in your perspective, how you balance being ambitious and chasing goals, but also being content and grateful for what you have, and if there's even a happy equilibrium.
In my book, I observed the same thing. And there are those who savor life, and those who want to accomplish a lot and change the world. And I've experienced both of those things. go play softball on a local softball team, have the beer after with your pals, whatever,
Mhm.
savoring life. And then it's each person has to know their nature and know how to face that trade-off. There's no right way, but there is your nature. And there are implications to both of those. And so you have to know the implications and deal with your nature. And it can't be all of one or all of the two. And what I found is that if you're clever, I found by and large that there are choices. Let's say work-life balance or this kind of thing, raising kids versus doing your job and all of that. And I found that most people think of it as there's one or the other, and I have to make the choice. And I found that while that's true to some extent, that if I'm clever, I can probably get 75% of both. And so, for example, I used to take my sons, or individually, on a business trip with me. I took my son to China, and I would bring him into meetings, and we would fly on the plane, and we would talk, and we would do those things. Friends or who I work with or whatever. But if you're clever, you can get more out of an hour. And so you can do both. And the key to life isn't to make the choices as much as it is to be clever of how do I get leverage to make the most, to get most in an hour, in each hour. And then I can pack more life into life.
Yeah. You've written in your book that I realize that the satisfaction of success doesn't come from achieving your goals, but from struggling well. And, I know like in sort of like Buddhist philosophy, they talk about suffering and how like that is really sort of the journey, the process. Can you shed more light on that? Like what you sort of mean by that and how that has played out in your life?
Well, it just means like pain plus reflection equals progress. And as you go through your journey, ironically, that the more you try to protect yourself, the weaker you will become, and the more little things will bother you, and the more you I don't want to make it black and white, but the more you push and you don't that you realize the benefits of pain, no gain.
Yep.
And you realize those things and you have the enjoyment of those things, the more you will get stronger and be better.
Yeah. How do you view your legacy, in terms of, let's say, looking back, you hope that you made a certain impact or mark, like a specific thing on the world. Like, what is that for you? What would you look back at the end of your life and say, like, I'm so happy that I accomplished this for people in the world?
I simultaneously believe, and I said it wrong in the book, that I'm simultaneously nothing and everything in a sense is. And what I mean is, I know that I'm nothing. I'm like an ant who is carrying a crumb. And so let's not get exaggerated about any impact. I'm a footprint in the sand that'll disappear and nobody will ever know, and it doesn't matter. And so that's, however, as an ant carrying a crumb, and to do it well, and to give myself the experiences. My basic purpose in life is to evolve and contribute to evolution. So if I can evolve, I like evolving. I like the evolving, and I like contributing to evolution in my small way. And they're instinctuals. It's instinctual. It's not cerebral. Okay, here I am at 75. I have certain feelings about, okay, I want to pass it along. And in the process, I feel good. Why am I doing this podcast with you? Like, it ain't for the money.
Right.
It ain't for the notoriety. Okay. It is that my hope is that people out there will find some benefit. And I feel good about that. And that's the same with my philanthropy. I've earned, a lot of money. So, and I can have impact. And also having a lot of money, like you could, just as there's a curse of not having enough money to have the basics, like a good education and that stuff, good adequate housing and all that, there's a curse of having too much money that can almost make you lazy, corrupt you, whatever. I don't want my kids to be given tons of money and luxury. And yet I can relate to people and things that I enjoy helping philanthropically,
Yeah, and I know you've famously signed the giving pledge, I believe. And I'm just curious in terms of, it sounds like throughout your life you had this threshold, this like baseline of like, this is where I need to be financially to pay my bills and kind of subsidize, my ability to go out and pursue things that I enjoy, my passion, spend time with the people I want to spend time with, and just live life not having to worry about money, right? Because that really, I think money is something that causes people to just completely go in a different direction for the purpose of it and not ever live out their full potential, right? I'm just curious, is that something that, how would you recommend people go about thinking about how to set that for themselves? Is it just, because I feel like you set that goal and then you get there and then you just forget that was your goal all along, and we just keep going and keep going and keep going. And I think that's where a lot of the unhappiness comes from when you hear about people saying, yeah, that person's has billions of dollars, but they're unhappy. I think that's where it is, because you kind of forget, you get to that mountaintop and then there's another mountaintop and another one. Like, how do you have that discipline to just, envision it, get there, and then not let it take you over?
Well, a few things come to mind. First of all, feel your experiences. I mean, see what is bringing you joy and excitement, and avoid an obsession. Think about, what is money for? It has no intrinsic value. It's just going to buy you stuff. And think about what it's for, and think about what you love and experience. Like, get back more to, let's say, what do you feel? What do you want to do? What's the connection to money?
Yeah. Well, Ray, this has been such a pleasure. I really appreciate you coming on the show and just sharing your story, but also all this wisdom that you've accumulated. And I really encourage people to read your book and really like put together their own principles, obviously, that they'll kind of learn and adopt over time. But is there anything else that you wish to share with the audience that I guess we didn't cover?
I think I would say, if there are people who are interested in things that I've said, just to be, as you mentioned, the book, there's a video that's a 30-minute video called Principles of Success that's free. Every time I write a book, I do a animated video, which are fun. And if you're interested in how the world order is changing, there's a video called The Changing World Order. You can see that.
That's a great one.
I did one how the economic machine works. And that's, I think, in 30 minutes, and that has 140 million people, and it's liked a lot. So if they want to learn more about any of those things, those are the ways to do it. But anyway, I appreciate you having me, and all the best, and see you next time.
Likewise. Thank you, sir.